Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza Omar. Now, a Hindu nationalist group has been blamed for attacking students and teachers at Jawaharlal National University in Mumbai. JNU students have named the right-wing group, the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, the ABVP, as the ones who were responsible. And this is the youth wing of the Hindu nationalist Rashtriya Svayam saying the RSS, the ideological parent of essentially India's ruling BJP. Now, this incident took place on a Sunday night when the AKBVP stormed the hostel and the university premises. They attacked students and teachers with rods and sticks, injuring at least 35 people. Now, on Monday, while it was very cold, hundreds of people took to the streets in major Indian cities to protest against this attack. In Mumbai, India's entertainment capital, a city which is known to never sleep, Bollywood celebrities joined student protesters at the Gateway of India monument. Here is what some of the protesters had to say.
This is the fury of every Indian. It is said that Mumbai never stops. People work a lot and keep working. If Mumbai public is here at Gateway of India for more than 24 hours, then something is definitely wrong in this country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Interior Minister Amit Shah have to understand this and think about it. They have to understand that what Delhi police is doing, what the central government is doing, won't hold against this. The huge turnouts of students as well as others here is very good. The best thing about it is that nobody looked at religion during these protests. This should open the eyes of the government. The country belongs to the students.
So we've seen these protests take place across India in the past few weeks, especially since the passing of the bill into an act, the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019. As a result, Indians from all walks of life, irrespective of their religious backgrounds, have been protesting, imploring to the government to take back this act, as it disenfranchises not only just the Muslim population within India, but coupled with the NRC and the NPR exercise underway, it also creates a feeling of animosity towards minorities. And as analysts are saying, goes very against the secular India, democratic India, and the constitution of the country. To analyze further what these protests could mean, who was really behind these attacks, we've got a journalist with us as well as an analyst. Let me introduce who we'll be speaking to. We have Mr. Ravi, who is joining us as an analyst from Mumbai, and also later on we'll be joined by a journalist reporting on some of the protests from Delhi. But let me start with you, Mr. Srivastav. Now, there were protests earlier also, especially the past few months, by these JNU students against a fee hike. And the JNU community generally is recognized as a rather liberal, left-leaning community. But the Sunday night attack on the community by those who are being linked to the RSS, is this linked, in your opinion, to just the protest, just to the fee rise, or can you see this transpiring more towards the student protest movement across the country towards the Citizenship Act?
Ayza, in fact, India is on boil for last 1 month. And this protest, this Jawaharlal Nehru University is a pioneer university in India. It is based in Delhi, the national capital. And the laureates, Nobel laureate like Abhijit Banerjee, India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman have been the alumni of this institute. This is said to be a perfect, institution which has got a leaning towards left, but the students are such that they do not believe in any kind of violence. They have differences of opinion with each other. There is a ABVP wing also, there is a leftist wing also, ISA. Both the wings are there, but they never resort to any kind of violence in the past history. They have been talking, they have been debating, they have been discussing peacefully and resolving the issues. 2 months before, this present government is hell-bent upon to destroy the institutions of this country. Whether it is Aligarh Muslim University, whether it is Jamia Millia Islamia, whether it is Jawaharlal University, they are after these institutions to spoil them. They will create one or the other problem. 2 months before, the latest problem created by the present government was to hike the fee of this particular university 10 times. And this university has got students coming from weaker sections of the society, lower strata of the society, who just cannot afford any kind of exorbitant fee and all which prevails in other private institutions. So there are these boys and girls, they were agitated for that particular fee hike, and they have been protesting for last 2 months. Suddenly on Sunday, the skirmishes between these two groups flared up completely. And I have already said on many channels, it was a government sponsored terrorism on these students. You have just now showing the girl. She is the president of the Jawaharlal Nehru Students Union. There are teachers, JUTA, there is a Jawaharlal Nehru Teacher Association. They are all together, and this girl has got 16 stitches on her forehead, and she has already broken her arm. The government wing ABVP goons who were outsiders, they were sent from the back door inside the JNU, and they beat up people in Periyar hostel, the Sabarmati hostel, and one more hostel, girls hostel, where they broke the furniture, they broke the doors, they broke the toilets, the girls were screaming. There was absolutely mayhem for 2.5 hours. The worst
during
thing
that
was,
time period,
these goons under the police protection. There are open videos which show that police is literally escorting them outside the institute. Such was the situation. And now today I have heard that they have filed a FIR against this girl only, whom you have just now shown, who is the president of the JNU Student Union.
Okay, here let me also welcome another who will be able to comment on the protest as it is underway in Delhi. I'd like to welcome TK Rajlakshmi, a journalist joining us from Delhi. Welcome to Newswire. Ms. Rajlakshmi, what can you tell us first of all about the protest which is underway in Delhi? What kind of numbers are we seeing? What are they chanting? And the kind of security arrangements that are in place right now?
See, as you know, there have been protests for the last almost for a month. It all began with the Citizenship Amendment Bill. In fact, the act which was passed by both houses of Parliament. Okay. Now, of course, those protests were across the country, and not only by any particular community. And there was a lot of support from across, where people felt that there was something, terribly unjust about this act, and that was discriminatory. And of course, and we are in a democracy. Every citizen, has a right to protest peacefully, and therefore peaceful protests were held across the country on this issue. And as I said, it sort of was cross-cutting. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the fact remains is that those, of course, those protests were still, happening. And when on Sunday night, we had this very unfortunate incident of hooligans, who wore masks, whose faces were covered, and who sort of attacked students as well as faculty of a very premier central university in the country, okay, namely Jawaharlal Nehru University. As you know, the students of Jawaharlal University had been agitating again peacefully for a revision of fees, because there was a fee hike which was quite steep, and students felt that they wouldn't be able to afford it because this university represented a certain diversity of character in terms of economic and social backgrounds. So we had a situation where the students were peacefully, demanding a rollback of the fee hike, but the vice chancellor of the university refused to, enter into any dialogue with them. Okay. Now this since the situation was there, and literally a standoff, had sort of developed. The students trying on their own, and the faculty also trying to mediate because classes were called off, etc. And so the situation had to be resolved. Now I think amid all this, there was some incident of scuffle, etc., between two groups of students, which again, was not something that was, out of out of control, and it could have been sort of handled, right? In fact, had the administration, intervened and sort of taken a certain proactive measure in trying to diffuse the situation of of stress that had developed. But unfortunately, it did not happen. And instead, what we had is a group of armed hooligans, which people believe were affiliated to some right-wing organization, student organization, called Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, and they basically the behest of obviously some people, they entered the campus and they stormed and they sort of began hitting faculty members.
But Ms. Rajlakshmi, there are reports coming out now. If you could confirm any of them, that this was a very planned attack. Of course, the policemen, the uniformed policemen who were supposed to be protecting the premises, they've been very active at university premises, especially the past few weeks, with students peacefully agitating against the CAA. But this time around, them not intervening is also being seen as them being complicit in this. But it is also being seen as a very organized attack, because there were several WhatsApp groups that were created. Reports are coming in where a lot of hate speech was being circulated. An attack was being provoked. Can you confirm any of these reports? Is there any information you have to add to this?
See, as far as the planned nature of the attacks is concerned, there seems to be some amount of planning, definitely, because they knew who to pick on. They picked up students who are affiliated to the left. They picked up, in fact, JNUSU president. They hit her on the head with a rod. She had 16 stitches. Okay, so she was sort of targeted, and a faculty member, who's also a representative of the Teachers Association. She was hit, by a stone on her head, and she sustained deep injuries. Right. So, and she was also among the section of the faculty who have been in a disagreement with the way the vice chancellor has been functioning. Okay. So there's all the more reason to believe that these attacks were targeted, and that they were sort of aimed at harming with fatal intent people who have been in opposition to this government in terms of its politics and its policies. Okay. Now, as far as the WhatsApp messages, of course, it will be investigated into. The veracity of it is not known, but clearly the way a mob enters, premier campus, in the capital, the country, where in fact there are private security guards, there's CCTV, everything. So how is it possible that all this happened without the knowledge?
Absolutely, but also now tell us, as the protests are in Delhi, tell us also if the government's taken any action. There's understanding that Amit Shah made phone calls to the Delhi cops to get an idea, to get a update on the situation. Has the government made any statement, taken any, said that those who have attacked will be questioned or an interrogation will take place?
No, not at all. I mean, it's not at all difficult for the police to swing into action and to nab these people, because they should just get hold of the CCTV footage, and they should, I'm sure Delhi police has a pretty high degree of efficiency when it comes, when they want to act, but it seems to me that there seems to be some deliberate slowdown, in terms of action being, taken against this, against the people who, vandalized hostel and university property. They harmed people, so I think it's a pretty serious thing.
So there's a rather silent response from the Indian government. Thank you so much, Rajlakshmi, joining us from Delhi, giving us an update. Coming back to you, Mr. Srivastav, something you also pointed this out, that this time round, instead of uniformed policemen who entered JNU, we saw masked hooligans. And as reports are coming in, they are linked, they are the youth wing of the RSS. But what other stark differences have you seen this time round, considering Jamia Millia University saw a similar attack, but by the police just a few weeks ago?
Ayza, there is a stark difference. In Jamia Millia, the police, without even taking any instructions from the vice chancellor of the university, entered the university and went into the canteen and library and all those premises, and literally, they thrashed students over there. They were hiding under the tables. They were hiding in the toilets. Such was the situation. Here, it was absolutely as if the police was, welcoming those guys, those people who came with the mask and they came inside. They did all vandalism. They beat people. They hit people with the rods. There are pictures that they are holding rods in their hand. They are holding the hammers in the hand and sticks in the hand. All kind of things they are having. And they went inside, did all that, and came back. And this journalist has also confirmed, I believe, verbatim whatever I had spoken earlier,
Absolutely.
that actually what has happened over there. Now, point is, even after 48 hours, the police has not done anything. And another eyewash has happened. The Home Minister calls up the cop, the police commissioner of Delhi, and takes a stock of the situation. I don't know what stock of the situation they are taking. They all are based in the same city. It is Delhi, where the Home Minister, where the Prime Minister, where the Chancellor, where the Registrar, where everybody is based. And he is taking stock of the situation. And still, 48 hours later, no arrests have been made.
Absolutely no arrests have been made. But Mr. Srivastav, these kind of incidents where the police is now openly seen as complicit, the university administration is seen as complicit because they've yet to take any punitive action against those who have assaulted these students. They've even given very vague statements where they absolutely omitted the mention that this was an entry of armed groups into the campus. Isn't this going to instigate more protests by students and civilians across India? Isn't this going to make the situation, the job of the Indian government harder?
Ayza, it's happening already. You may have seen in Bombay, the Gateway of India, there was strong protest the same night, whole night. Yesterday, whole day, people were protesting. The Bollywood team was there, Anurag Kashyap, then this Anubhav Sinha, the Dia Mirza, the Deepika Padukone, all these famous stars, they are Saurabh Bhaskar, they are all sitting on dharna over there. Now they have been shifted to Azad Maidan opposite the Bombay Municipal Corporation. They have been shifted there, but the protests are still on. The in support protest has happened at Bangalore, Chennai, Jadavpur University, the Aligarh Muslim University, Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi, and Patna and Chandigarh. All these places, strong agitations are happening in support of their student brothers who have been hit in Delhi.
Mr. Srivastav, as this situation unfolds, we would hope to get more updates from the field. But just very quickly, in the last 30 seconds left, do you think there is any possibility that the BJP-led government is going to take back a few steps, maybe just to appease those on the ground protesting?
I apprehend they will not. They are very stubborn people. Had they been doing any such kind of a thing, they would have talked to the JNU students in last 2 months. They did not. There has been no action from the government side. There has been no reconciliation with the students. Even on CAA, NPR and NRC exercise, you have seen the government has not relented at all. The agitations have been happening for last 1 month in major cities of the country, and the government is unmoved. They are just not making any kind of reconciliatory tactics or any kind of talks with the stakeholders. They are not
even
doing
a statement is yet to come from the government to acknowledge that this has happened. Well, Mr. Srivastav, thank you once again for sharing your analysis on this. It's a developing story. We'll bring you updates as we go along. But right now, we'll take a quick short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Newswire. While the Middle East has been erupting on various fronts, especially the US-Iran tensions are escalating rapidly. Turkey's involvement in Libya is unfolding. What we haven't heard much from on the side of Syria is about how the Damascus-led offensive in Idlib against the last rebel-held area is progressing. At the same time, there are reports coming in that the YPG, the PKK, that Turkey recognizes as a terror group in Syria, has allegedly set free hundreds of Daesh, ISIS terrorists, along with their families, from a camp in northeastern Syria. Now, these reports are coming in from Syrian local sources, where they're talking about the numbers of those released terrorists being around 400, which is, of course, very disturbing. And this is happening in a camp called Al-Hol town, which was, according to the UN, initially made in 2017 to contain around 10,000 internally displaced civilians. However, it has been above capacity, packed above capacity to as some reports coming in of 73,000 individuals. Now, as this is happening on the side, we are also expecting important talks to unfold between the leaders of Turkey and Syria on January 8th. And of course, they're both facing each other on opposite sides, not only in Syria, but also in Libya. Now, we're trying to understand this situation, especially in terms of the reports. For that, we've got with us Mr. Can Hasasu joining this conversation from Istanbul. He's an analyst. Mr. Hasasu, thank you for coming on Newswire. These reports coming in of Daesh being released in large numbers from these camps by the PKK. These are reports that have been coming in since the past few months now. Tell us a little about your understanding of the reason behind this release, the confirmation that this release is even taking place, but because earlier on it was being called as propaganda by Turkey, that such a thing was not happening back in October when the first reports came in.
First of all, we have to understand the fact that the YPG kept Daesh prisoners is not as we understand in ordinary countries. These are not organized, well-protected prisons, and the YPG is trying to benefit from the Daesh or ISIS presence in its territory, bargaining them to make use of them to use them as an argument against the Western countries to support them most of the time. And when we specifically talk about this whole camp, the camp is a crowded, big area. It's a massive area. Don't imagine that this camp is really protected and no one can get out of the camp. No, it's not like that at all. There are a lot of people who being suspected of being related or connection to ISIS, and most of the people in this camp are not denying their support to the terrorist group. But the main problem is inside the camp. I mean, releasing these people is nonsense with the circumstances that we know about the camp, since the camp is not really closed and isolated to the out world. But inside the camp itself is a big threat, since it became a school for Daesh. Many children who are growing up in these big crowds, they are really getting the same ideology that the terrorist group used to have, and they are growing up on this ideology. So these camps are serving as a school for the terrorist group, a future for its future recruits and fighters. And the YPG is not really doing anything to keep the world safe against this threat.
But earlier on, the Foreign Minister of Turkey had commented on reports of these prisoners being released for money, saying this is a terrorist group and that is what could be expected by them. So was he endorsing that such a tactic is being employed by the PKK in Syria?
Well, before the tactic, as I said, the YPG-controlled area shouldn't be considered as a legitimate country in our understanding, because these areas are run by the YPG. They have their own system, but this system is nothing to compare to official country that we know. So the system in these areas, the YPG is trying to get benefit of the Daesh members, or the people who accused to be Daesh members in these areas, and they are ready to make use of them in any terms, like
right, but
smugglers
I understand that Turkey sees the PKK, the YPG, as a terrorist group. That is, I see what you're saying here, but at the same time, as YPG has rebranded itself as the SDF, the allies of the US when they were fighting Daesh in ISIS in Syria, but it is a big concern that they were, and as US recognized, were the guardians of these prisons where Daesh and ISIS prisoners, terrorists were held. So it would be a concern if they are being released while Turkey continues its operation to establish a safe zone to fight these very terrorists.
Well, I was actually not giving the Turkish perspective. I'm trying to give you some facts from the ground, which is YPG is not controlling the area in terms of the protecting rest of the world from Daesh. I mean, the YPG really tried to sell itself to the world as the protector of the West against Daesh. But right now, the situation is not like that at all. There are still Daesh cells inside Syria and inside Iraq, which YPG doesn't even reach.
Right.
So that's what I mean. I mean,
okay.
this concept of YPG doing enough, not doing enough. YPG-controlled areas are not at the standards that we think of. Okay. So they are not even capable to do this imaginary role.
Meanwhile, we are seeing, and this is going on for weeks now, renewed attacks on the rebel-held area in Idlib. This is essentially violating that pact between Ankara and Moscow to build peace in the region, and it's putting an enormous strain on this bilateral relationship between Ankara and Moscow, especially now with the development in Libya. How do you see the future of Syria right now while these developments in the Middle East are continuing?
Yeah, actually, the meeting between the Russian president and the Turkish president will actually give us a clearer idea about where Turkey and Russia are after all what happened in Syria and in Libya and what's happening in Iraq right now. Of course, the regime bombardment towards the civilian areas around Idlib is causing a massive humanitarian crisis. We already talked about this, and this is continuing. And our reports from the region says that the civilian population really desperately is waiting the international community to come out with a resolve to their problem, because they have no other choice but to run towards Turkey and Europe if the situation keep escalating in this specific area. But as I said, the meeting between Turkish President Erdogan and the Russian President Putin in Istanbul will give us a better idea of where this is going towards about the direction of where the situation could be escalate in Idlib.
Mr. Hasasu, do you worry that the way tensions are rising between U.S. and Iran and the way regional powers are aligning themselves behind the two, that this will affect the conflict in Syria and Turkey's approach there?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And what's happening now between Iran and the United States is definitely going to affect the balance in Syria and in the Middle East. And we are actually going to see the effects of these in the upcoming days, since Iran had a big say in the Syrian matter, and it's the main power that supports the ground forces of the Syrian regime. So Iran's position definitely is going to be important to understand what's going to happen next in Idlib as well.
All right, Mr. Can Hasasu there joining us from Istanbul. With this, we'll take a quick short break. We'll be back with more analysis on our upcoming story. Stay with us. Welcome back to Newswire. Now, we've been talking about the Middle East tensions and Iran-US tensions, of course, affecting the entire region, not only just the region, the entire world. Iran's Quds Force head, General Qasem Soleimani, was killed in a US airstrike last week, was finally laid to rest today in his hometown, Kerman. And today is also the last day of the 3-day mourning period that was announced by the Iranian government. The Iranian state television has showed footage of tens of thousands of people on Kerman streets. There have been Iranian flags and images of the general during the funeral procession. There were also reports that over 5 million mourners had gathered in the capital of Tehran and a city of Qom in a very emotionally charged funeral procession in the past 3 days. Now, the latest developments as they escalate the tensions between US and Iran, we've just seen reports coming in of Germany having announced that it will partially withdraw troops from Iraq. You understand that Germany is a NATO ally of the US, but Germany says it's responding to the growing security concerns in the Gulf regions, and that is why they have decided to temporarily thin out the number of soldiers here in Iraq. So what implications is this going to have on the kind of moves that the US is planning to make in the Middle East? We will be talking about that. Also, Iran's parliament has passed a motion that designates all US forces as terrorists. Now, this is an amendment to last year's motion, which just designated the US Central Command as terrorist organizations as a response to the US calling the IRGC a terrorist organization. So we'll be discussing this also. What I should also add here that the Iranian parliament has said they will allocate 200 million euros to the Quds force to boost their defensive power. So all this and more we will be having a conversation of with our experts. Let me introduce the analysts joining us today. We from Tehran, Mr. Hamid Gholamzadeh, and also from Tehran, we have Mr. Mostafa Khoshcheshm for this conversation. I want to start with you, Mr. Khoshcheshm, especially the disturbing reports for especially the US, these would be more disturbing, of their NATO ally, longtime Germany, is now announcing that they will be thinning out their number of troops. When this sort of an announcement comes in, how do you think it sounds across to the US? Is this a kind of lack of support that President Trump has, had initially shown anger that the EU is not doing enough, his allies are not doing enough in supporting his move in Iran?
I can very vividly see divisions and rifts among, in the nations, the NATO member nations. Some of them are shouting against the United States crime. They believe that they shouldn't be fooled by the United States again. They remember quite well how they were fooled and dragged into the war of Iraq back in 2003, especially the UK, that was brought into the war on hopes. And they don't want to be, repeat this experience again. So part of the UK community, especially the UK, which has a large population of Muslims, they are thinking about the repercussions that would be many for the UK and for the Europeans. And of course, the Europeans altogether, they know the costs are too high. They have much at stake. Only without a war, without any military engagement, if just the JCPOA collapses, and if Iran decides to, enhance its reciprocal measures with regard to the JCPOA, then it would remove the blocks on its and the seals on its borders, and would allow all those refugees, asylum seekers, and displaced population that have rushed to Iran from the eastern borders to get to Europe. There are millions of them, actually, and Iran is spending billions of dollars to accommodate them each year. Iran could remove the seal and let them go and move towards Europe. We do all remember what happened the last time that millions of refugees took to Europe. Many governments were replaced with ultra-right parties. Brexit is just one such case. So there will be socio-economic and geopolitical repercussions for the Europeans. Now, let alone the breakout of war or military confrontation between Iran and the United States. So as a matter of fact, the Europeans have come to realize, at least part of the European community has come to realize, that the costs are too high, but they've taken this step a little late because they needed to take action when the United States discarded the nuclear deal. They should have stood up to the U.S. in order to not allow Donald Trump escalate the situation. They've taken action too late, of course, now, but still, it's much better if they avoid joining Donald Trump rather than, supporting him in this criminal action, whose repercussions would first go to the Europeans and then the United States.
Right. Mr. Gholamzadeh, your take on this, considering the Foreign Minister of UK, Dominic Raab, he had a conversation with Prime Minister of Iraq, and he talked about how it was necessary that Iran de-escalate. But at the same time, they have shown that they stand behind the US. How do you read, especially also in light of what Germany's announced in thinning out their troops in Iraq? How do you interpret this?
The first point is that you cannot expect Iran to de-escalate, because it was the United States which carried out an act of war against Iran, and you cannot just easily ask Iran to de-escalate the situation. And the second point is the very true point that Mr. Khoshcheshm just mentioned, that the Europeans made the mistake long ago, and they are unfortunately continuing to make the mistakes by following the American wrong policies. And we have seen a lot of cases in which Americans took wrong measures, and the Europeans have been silent about that. It was, first of all, and most importantly, about the JCPOA. They were just stood again and just remained silent while the Americans withdrew from the JCPOA. They forced the European signatories to the JCPOA to do not fulfill the commitments they had. And now the most recent one is the violation of all the international laws, violation of the sovereignty of Iraq, and attacking against an official figure in Iran. And all of them is just wrong measures, wrong steps by the Americans, and they are remaining silent. We had a statement by 3 European figures yesterday. We had the announcement of the head of NATO yesterday saying that they are supporting the Americans. It was just against international law. How can you just defend the Americans and ask Iran to de-escalate the situation? That is the mere mistake of the Europeans, that they are actually downgrading the international law and international organizations. You cannot expect the United Nations to have any role in the world anymore. It might be similar to what happened to the League of Nations after World War I, which led actually to the Second World War.
Right. No, but the distancing of long-time allies of the US is a significant development here, as we can see if you read between the lines the way the EU is reacting, putting aside the conversation whether it has ever done enough when it comes to the JCPOA and supporting Iran as it has always promised. But let's talk a little about how Iraq has reacted, whether it is a symbolic gesture, even Mr. Khoshcheshm, if I could get your comments on this, the parliament voting for the anti-IS coalition soldiers, for the US to leave the country after this drone strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani, even if it is a symbolic gesture in itself, because there's a lot that goes into that conversation. President Trump, he might just have lost his ground here in Iraq, considering the kind of turmoil, the protests Iraq is facing, and be forced it to get closer to Iran.
Ayza, it's pretty well clear that the United States has been violating the sovereignty of Iraq. They've been humiliating them. They've been insulting them, actually. That's the way the Iraqis are seeing the developments, at least in the last 1 month. The American drones, bombers, they've been bombing and attacking the Iraqi Hashd-e-Shabi positions frequently. They've been killing their commanders. And let's remember, the Hashd-e-Shabi was enlisted as part of Iraq's official armed forces. So that's when a guest that is to be in a country to help their hosts fight terrorists, they don't do so, and they take on their hosts, and they also assassinate the most famous commander in the fight against ISIL. So the Iraqis believe that they need to take action. And believe me or not, the Americans have been very much lucky, because they can now leave Iraq pretty easily without, they can escape without any casualties. But
there are 6,000 troops allegedly in Iraq there. But Mr. Khoshcheshm, we were running time. I want to get this point also. There is a huge difference in how President Trump has approached Iran and how Pentagon has. And we've seen this from Defense Secretary Mark Esper's public comments just yesterday, that the US will follow the laws of armed conflict. Now, this is, of course, meaning that they will not target cultural sites, something that President Trump has categorically said that he would do in those tweets on January 5th. Now, do you feel that President Trump is on his own tangent here, or that the Pentagon will move more cautiously in the days ahead?
Based on documents, the Pentagon and the U.S. Army chiefs, they've been wary of Iran's military pros, and they have always, kept away from Iran for the very same reason. But Donald Trump is a little bit different, and he is the president. He has the say. When he warned to target Iranian control centers, he meant two things. First, he meant to, threaten Iran that it would obliterate Iranian civilization as well as ancient sites. In other words, he repeated the same phrase that Netanyahu repeated a few months ago when he was leaning against the wall of a nuclear facility. That is the threat that he said, we are going to wipe Iran off the map. So he repeated the same in a different language. But a more important interpretation comes when you dig deeper. I believe he was implying an attack on Iran's or the Shiite community's holy shrines. They know that how Shiite community in Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, elsewhere, they are worried about and they are sensitive about the holy shrines. And they call themselves the defenders and protectors of these holy shrines.
So he was really touching a raw nerve there, provoking one... Right. We're running out of time. Sorry to cut you there. Mr. Gholamzadeh, I want to quickly get your closing comments on this. Iran's Foreign Minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, he said that removing the U.S. from Western Asia is what will end wars and deaths in this region. Quickly, please, if you could outline the kind of options that Iran could employ in the response to Qasem Soleimani's death.
I missed part of the question, but generally we're talking about the removal of the Americans from the Iraq. That was mentioned by Foreign Minister Zarif. It is a correct point, and it is a demand from not only Iran but also the Iraqis as well. The United States has been in Iraq for many years, about 17 years now, and it has destroyed enough infrastructures in Iraq, and there is nothing more to destroy actually by the Americans. So they don't have any place there. The popularity of the Americans in Iraq is almost zero, and you cannot have them. There is no public support for them, and it is some demand from the people in Iraq to have Americans out of the country. And Iran is supporting that point, and it is actually a wish not only for General Soleimani, not only for Iranians, but also for the whole region, that they don't want someone from thousands of miles away to be here and to dictate everything to the region, to bring insecurity to the region. And now it is the time that people in the region have awakened, actually, and they now are demanding the Americans to leave the region.
Right.
And it is the best chance, as Mr. Khoshcheshm mentioned, that it is the best chance for them to save the face and leave the region now before there is any retaliations and any
before there is any retaliation. Thank you so much, Mr. Gholamzadeh. They're joining us from Tehran, and thank you, Mr. Khoshcheshm. The perfect opportunity for the U.S. to withdraw their troops from Iraq, from the region, as the anti-U.S. sentiment grows. We were hearing from our analyst from Tehran on the developments on the U.S.-Iran tensions. With that, we've unfortunately run out of time. We will see you tomorrow with a new episode of Newswire. Till then, goodbye.